2 wide-body jets, 537 people, 131 days. No other airline in modern history has lost that much in so little time and kept flying. One aircraft vanished over the southern Indian Ocean and has never been found. The other was shot out of the sky at 33,000 feet by a surface-to-air missile over a war zone. If you are an Avgeek like I am, you probably already know what airlines I'm talking about. You are completely right. I'm talking about Malaysia Airlines, flag carrier of a country of around 34 million people, and the year that almost killed it was 2014. But shockingly, that was not even its first near-death experience. It was its second, and a third was waiting around the corner with the COVID pandemic. Today, the airline is placing an order for 75 new aircraft and betting its survival on a premium Asia-Pacific strategy. Stay with me until the end of this video, and you will understand how a carrier that should have died 3 times is now placing a bigger bet than ever before, and whether that bet actually makes any sense. Let's go way back to October 1937. Singapore was still a British colony. A company called Malayan Airways Limited was registered on the 12th of that month, a joint venture between Imperial Airways, the Straits Steamship Company of Singapore, and the Ocean Steamship Company of Liverpool. The paperwork sat on a shelf for almost 10 years. Then the Second World War came, Japan occupied Singapore and Malaya, and the project went dormant. On the 2nd of April 1947, an airspeed console twin engine aircraft named Raja Udang lifted off from Kallang Airport in Singapore with 5 passengers on board. Destination, Kuala Lumpur's Sungai Besi Airfield. That was the start. The airline grew with the region around it. Douglas DC-3s arrived by the end of that first year, flying new routes to Jakarta, Bangkok, and Saigon. By 1960, a fleet that now included Vickers Viscounts, Lockheed Super Constellations, and Bristol Britannias was operating the first long-haul service from Singapore to Hong Kong. When the Federation of Malaysia was formed in 1963, the carrier was renamed Malaysian Airways. Singapore broke away from the Federation in 1965, and the airline became Malaysia Singapore Airlines, jointly owned by both governments. That arrangement lasted barely 6 years. Political friction between Kuala Lumpur and Singapore made a shared flag carrier impossible. In 1972, the assets were split. Malaysia took the domestic network and most of the regional routes and created Malaysian Airlines System, or MAS. Singapore took the long-haul aircraft, the overseas offices, and created Singapore Airlines. 2 carriers, same parents, born on the same day, raised in very different houses. The first shock came early. On the 4th of December, 1977, Flight MH653, a Boeing 737-200, operating a short domestic hop from Penang to Kuala Lumpur with 93 passengers and 7 crew, was hijacked shortly after reaching cruise altitude. Cockpit voice recorder transcripts suggested the hijacker identified himself as a member of the Japanese Red Army. The aircraft was diverted towards Singapore, then something went wrong in the cockpit. Shots were heard. The aircraft plunged into a swamp at Tanjung Kupang in Johor State. All 100 people on board were killed. It remains the deadliest aviation disaster ever to occur on Malaysian soil, and the full circumstances have never been solved. The Malaysian government did not publicly release the final report decades later. For millions of Malaysians, the letters MH carried a quiet unease long before 2014. Here is the question the split and the early tragedies raised almost immediately. How does a Malaysian flag carrier compete, long-term, against neighbors who are both bigger and hungrier? Through the 1980s, the answer was scale. In 1989, Malaysian Airline System became the first Southeast Asian carrier to fly direct to South America. The airline built a long-haul network through Europe, the Middle East, Australia, and North America on a fleet of Boeing 747-400s, Boeing 737s, and Airbus A330s. Then, in the mid-1990s, the Malaysian government decided privatization was the next step. In 1994, a businessman named Tajudin Ramli acquired a 32% controlling stake in Malaysian Airline System, financed by 1.79 billion ringgit in bank loans. Tajudin was a protege of the powerful finance minister, Daim Zainuddin. His vision was aggressive. New Boeing 777s called Super Rangers, a global cargo hub in Hahn, Germany. Long-haul expansion across Europe, North America, and South America. On paper, it looked like ambition finally matched by capital. Then came the Asian financial crisis of 1997 and 1998. The Malaysian ringgit collapsed against the United States dollar. Aircraft leases and fuel were priced in dollars. Tickets were sold in ringgit. The mathematics broke. By the time the dust settled, Malaysia Airlines had posted cumulative losses exceeding 8 billion ringgit under Tajudin's leadership. Share price fell to 3 ringgit 68. In December 2000, the government of Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad agreed to buy back Tajudin's 32% stake at 8 ringgit per share, more than double the market price, at a total cost of around 1.8 billion ringgit, 117% premium over the market. Critics accuse Mahathir and Daim of handing a private businessman a sweetheart exit at taxpayer expense. Lawsuits, counterclaims, and Dana Harder recovery cases dragged through the Malaysian courts for the next 2 decades. The airline was renationalized. It was also, by any reasonable accounting standard, insolvent. The turnaround began in 2005 when a businessman called Idris Jala was brought in as chief executive. Jala launched what he called the business transformation plan. He cut loss-making routes. He shed surplus aircraft. He renegotiated supplier contracts. He introduced a pricing system that actually matched demand. In the 19 months to December 2007, the airline posted a net profit of around 853 million ringgit. It looked like the corner had finally been turned. But structurally, the same problem remained. Kuala Lumpur sat squeezed between Singapore Changi to the south and the Gulf carriers of Dubai, Doha, and Abu Dhabi to the west. AirAsia, founded by Tony Fernandez, after he bought a struggling rival for 1 ringgit in 2001, was eating the domestic and short-haul regional market. By the early 2010s, Malaysia Airlines was bleeding cash again. Losses returned. Then came the year that changed everything. The year 2014. The 8th of March 2014, flight MH370, a Boeing 777-200ER, took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 1:41 in the morning, bound for Beijing. On board were 227 passengers and 12 crew. 38 minutes later, the aircraft's transponder stopped transmitting. Military radar tracked it, turning sharply west, then north, before the data ran out over the Andaman Sea. Satellite handshakes later confirmed the aircraft flew on for roughly 7 more hours into the southern Indian Ocean. More than 11 years, multiple ocean search expeditions, and 1 renewed private search launched in early 2025 later, the main wreckage has still not been found. A handful of confirmed and probable pieces of debris have washed up on Reunion Island and along the East African coast. Investigations in Malaysia, Australia, and the United States have never produced a definitive cause. It remains the single most mysterious disappearance in the history of commercial aviation. 131 days later, on the 17th of July 2014, Flight MH17 departed Amsterdam Schiphol for Kuala Lumpur. The aircraft was another Boeing 777-200ER, carrying 283 passengers and 15 crew. At 33,000 feet over eastern Ukraine, a Russian-made Buk surface-to-air missile, fired from territory controlled by pro-Russian separatists, destroyed the aircraft in flight. All 298 people on board were killed, including 196 Dutch nationals. A Dutch-led joint investigation team later concluded that the missile system had been transported from a Russian military unit. In November 2022, a Dutch court convicted 2 Russians and 1 Ukrainian separatist of murder in absentia. 537 deaths in 2 disasters. Neither of them, in any strict aviation safety sense, a failure of the aircraft or of Malaysia Airlines maintenance. Both of them, in the eyes of the traveling public, a reason to book somebody else. Bookings collapsed. Forward sales dropped by double digits on almost every route. Malaysia Airlines reported losses of 1.6 billion ringgit for the 2014 financial year. Khazanah Nasional, the Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund and majority shareholder, stepped in with a 6 billion ringgit recovery plan. The old Malaysian airline system, Berhad, was delisted from the Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange. A new entity, Malaysia Airlines Berhad, was created on the 1st of September 2015 to take its place. Roughly 6,000 employees out of 20,000 were let go. A German turnaround specialist named Christoph Müller, who had previously rescued Aer Lingus, was appointed chief executive in May 2015. He quit in April 2016 after less than a year in the job, citing changed personal circumstances. The real answer was more complicated. He had concluded the airline could not be saved on the timeline promised. Isham Ismail, a pilot who had joined the carrier in 1979 as a cadet, took over as group chief executive in December 2017. He is still in the job today on his second contract extension. Did any of it work? Partly. Then the pandemic hit. In 2020, passenger revenue evaporated almost overnight. Malaysia Airlines went through a second major restructuring, this time using a United Kingdom scheme of arrangement to push through painful terms with lessors and creditors. By the end of 2021, the airline had reduced its liabilities by more than 15 billion ringgit and eliminated 10 billion ringgit in legacy debt. Khazanah committed another 3.6 billion ringgit in new capital, of which about 1.3 billion has actually been drawn down and around 2.3 billion is still available as a reserve. The Airbus A380-800 fleet, once the flagship, was pulled from service and put up for sale. In 2022, the group posted its first operating profit since the MH3 70 year of 540 million ringgit. In 2023, for the first time since 2010, Malaysia Aviation Group delivered a net profit of 766 million ringgit. Then the engines started failing. On the 2nd of September 2024, a Cathay Pacific Airbus A350-1000 bound for Zurich suffered an in-flight engine fire shortly after takeoff. The cause was a failed high-pressure fuel hose on a Rolls-Royce Trent XWB-97 engine. The European Aviation Safety Agency ordered emergency inspections across the global A350-1000 fleet. Malaysia Airlines, whose 7 Airbus A350-900 aircraft used the related Trent XWB-84 engine, voluntarily inspected its fleet and found a potential fuel hose issue on one aircraft. Combined with slower than promised engine shop visits and delayed deliveries of new Boeing 737 MAX jets from Seattle, the reliability crunch forced Malaysia Airlines to cut its own network capacity by 18% from September through December 2024, a self-inflicted schedule reduction during the traditionally strongest travel quarter of the year. The numbers for 2024 tell a sobering story. Malaysia Aviation Group reported a net profit of just 54 million ringgit, down 93% from the previous year. Operating profit fell from 890 million ringgit to 113 million ringgit. Group revenue slipped 1% to 13.68 billion ringgit. Passenger yields dropped by roughly 10%. The group did carry 16.6 million passengers, up 16% year on year, and load factors improved 3 points to 80%. So demand was not the problem. The problem was that Malaysia Airlines did not have enough working aircraft to meet the demand that was there. As Isham Ismail put it in October 2024, the group was deeply disappointed by the delivery delays from Airbus and the ongoing setbacks on its Boeing 737 MAX 8 deliveries. Cash balance, at least, remained healthy at around 3 billion ringgit as of early February 2025. Compare that to the competition. Singapore Airlines posted a record net profit of 2.78 billion Singapore dollars for its financial year ending March 2024. AirAsia and its long-haul arm now move more Malaysian passengers each year than the flag carrier on point-to-point intra-Asia routes. Emirates, Qatar Airways, and Etihad between them have locked up most of the long-haul traffic between Europe and Southeast Asia that once flowed through Kuala Lumpur. Thai Airways, which also went through a court-supervised restructuring during COVID, has come out leaner and posted a net profit of around 26 billion Thai baht in 2024. By regional standards, Malaysia Airlines is no longer the worst in class. It is simply no longer, obviously, the winner either. So what is the bet from here? It is enormous. In 2022, Malaysia Aviation Group ordered 20 Airbus A330-900 wide bodies. In July 2025, during Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's visit to France, the group added another 23 3900s, bringing the total firm order to 40 aircraft. It also has orders for 43 Boeing 737 MAX, 8 narrow bodies, and 12 Boeing 737 MAX, 10 aircraft. The first 330-900 was delivered on the 30th of November 2024 and is already flying to Melbourne, Auckland, and Bali. The stated goal is to grow the mainline fleet from around 90 aircraft in 2026 to 116 aircraft by 2035. Revenue target for 2030 is 24.6 billion ringgit, roughly double 2024 levels. Operating profit margin target is 9%, up from 1% today. The strategy has a name: Premium Asia Pacific Carrier. The pitch is that Malaysia Airlines can carve out a defensible middle position between Singapore Airlines at the top of the market and AirAsia at the bottom, selling premium leisure traffic between Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia, supported by Malaysia's halal tourism and medical tourism sectors. Here is the risk. Every one of those numbers depends on aircraft actually arriving on time, engines actually working, and a global travel market that does not crack again. If Airbus continues to slip on A330-900 deliveries, if Boeing continues to stumble on 737 MAX production, if Rolls-Royce engines continue to need longer shop visits than planned, the entire growth curve flattens. A third consecutive profitable year becomes harder. A fourth crisis becomes thinkable. And Malaysia Airlines has already used most of the political goodwill that a flag carrier gets in a single lifetime. Another taxpayer bailout in 2028 or 2030 would be a political earthquake. Geopolitics is the other variable. Roughly 15% of Malaysia Airlines revenue historically came from routes into Europe. Those routes now take longer and burn more fuel because Russian airspace is closed. Oil price spikes linked to conflict in the Middle East feed directly into the cost base. A single aviation incident involving any carrier in the region at a moment of public nervousness can still move Malaysia Airlines bookings faster than any rival. The bright side of the ledger is real too. The brand has survived 2 air disasters that would have buried almost any other carrier. Malaysian engineering and cabin crew talent from the Malaysian airline system era now runs technical operations and service training at airlines across the Gulf and Asia. The domestic and regional network connects around 97 destinations across Asia, Europe, and Australasia. And by late 2025, the group was operating more than 310 flights a day. You cannot buy that kind of infrastructure for cash. You build it over 80 years, or you do not build it at all. If Izam Ismail's eventual successor can keep the aircraft flying, keep Khazanah patient, and keep the premium leisure bet on track, Malaysia Airlines could finally become the carrier the 1994 privatization promised and never delivered. If any one of those 3 things breaks, there may not be a fourth restructuring. There may just be a merger, a sale to AirAsia's parent group, or a quiet retirement of the Malaysia Airlines brand into a regional subsidiary. Which outcome do you think lands first? The premium Asia-Pacific carrier actually working, or a fourth crisis forcing another government rescue? Tell me in the comments. I'm very curious for what you think. Before you go, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to ExPlaned if you haven't already. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.